The Qualron fleet burned. Across the dark expanse above their homeworld, 17 capital ships drifted in pieces, their hulls torn open, atmosphere venting in frozen plumes, reactors flickering into darkness one by one. The Vorkath battle formation held perfect geometry, like a closing fist, each ship positioned with mathematical precision. Their cannons fired in sequence, not in wild volleys, but in calculated waves that overwhelmed defensive screens through sheer efficiency. Admiral Thessa watched from the command bridge of the Qualron's glory, her 3 hearts beating in rapid succession. She had commanded this fleet for 40 cycles. She had studied every Vorkath engagement across 17 conquered civilizations. She had prepared for this moment with every resource her species could muster. It hadn't been enough. Shields at 12%, her tactical officer reported. Main weapons offline, casualties across all decks. Pull the remaining ships into defensive formation, Thessa ordered. Focus fire on their lead cruiser, if we can break their coordination. They're already changing formation, the officer interrupted. They anticipated that response. Of course they had. The Vorkath never did anything without anticipation. That was what made them unstoppable, not their technology, though it was formidable, but their methodology. They didn't conquer through brute force alone. They conquered through patterns, through predictability, through understanding their enemy better than the enemy understood themselves. The Qualron had known this. They had studied the recorded battles. The Jorvak, with their particle shields and swarm tactics, crushed in 3 hours. The Netharim, with their cloaking technology and guerrilla strategies, hunted down over 6 weeks, every ship found and destroyed. The Muralax, who had fought the Vorkath to a standstill for months, until the Vorkath changed tactics entirely and erased their entire species from existence in a single day. The pattern was always the same: study, adapt, destroy. And now the Qualron. Thessa looked at her crew, faces she had known for decades, species she had served alongside since her first command. Their eyes held the same understanding. They weren't going to survive this, but they could make the Vorkath pay for every kilometer of space they took. All hands, she announced, prepare for ramming speed. The bridge fell silent. Ramming was suicide. Ramming was what species did when they had nothing left to lose, but the Qualron had passed that point long ago. Admiral, her navigation officer said quietly, the Vorkath are pulling back. Thessa's heart stuttered. Explain. She looked at the tactical display. The Vorkath formation was indeed withdrawing, not in retreat but in reorganization. Their ships were moving into a wider pattern, creating distance. It made no sense. They had the Qualron fleet broken. They could finish this in minutes. Then she saw why. The Vorkath weren't retreating from the Qualron. They were repositioning to face something else. That's not possible, her sensor officer whispered. Thessa looked at the long-range scans. A new fleet had entered the system. Not Qualron reinforcements, there were none left. Not any known species from the Galactic Council. These ships were strange, blocky, utilitarian, lacking the elegant curves of Qualron design or the brutal efficiency of Vorkath architecture. They looked almost primitive. But they were moving fast, faster than any ship should move. What are they? Thessa asked. Unknown configuration, the sensor officer reported. The Vorkath are hailing them. They're demanding surrender. The strange fleet didn't respond. They just kept closing. I have the Vorkath transmissions, communications said. They're threatening annihilation, standard warning. But the strange ships weren't turning away. They were accelerating. Thessa watched in disbelief as the Vorkath opened fire on this new threat. The first volley struck the lead ship, and something impossible happened. Instead of shattering under the impact, the ship's forward hull shed armor plating that had been designed specifically to detach. The energy dissipated harmlessly, scattering across the void. Secondary impacts were absorbed by layers of ablative material that flaked away like scales. They're dispersing the energy, her tactical officer breathed. The hull is. It's sacrificial. They knew they'd be hit. The Vorkath paused their assault. It was barely a hesitation, barely enough for a sensor blip, but Thessa saw it. The Vorkath had encountered something they hadn't predicted. The strange ships returned fire. Their weapons weren't energy-based. They were kinetic mass drivers firing projectiles at impossible velocities. The first shot struck a Vorkath cruiser amidships and punched clean through it. Atmosphere erupted from both sides of the breach. The cruiser's reactor went critical and the ship died in a blaze of white light. "One shot," someone on the bridge whispered. "They just killed a Vorkath cruiser with one shot." The Vorkath formation fractured, not from damage but from shock. They had never seen anything like this. Their perfect patterns, their calculated adaptations, their understanding of every known enemy, none of it applied to these blocky ships that took hits without flinching and returned fire with weapons that ignored shields entirely. Thessa watched, frozen, as the Vorkath recovered. Their command structure reasserted itself. They changed formation, spread out to avoid concentrated fire, began targeting the engines of the strange ships instead of their hulls. It was textbook adaptation. It was what made them unstoppable. It wasn't enough. The strange ships reacted faster. They didn't form patterns of their own. They actively broke any pattern the Vorkath tried to impose. When the Vorkath spread out, the strange ships did something that made no tactical sense. They charged directly into the center of the Vorkath formation. Suicide, Thessa thought. They're throwing their ships away. But they weren't dying. The Vorkath had to hold their fire to avoid hitting their own vessels. The strange ships exploited the hesitation, firing at point-blank range into the Vorkath's vulnerable underbellies. Each shot killed another capital ship. The Vorkath tried to retreat, to regroup, to adapt again. The strange ships followed them. Thessa's bridge erupted in noise, celebration, confusion, desperate hope, but she wasn't celebrating. She was watching the Vorkath commander's ship. It was pulling back, yes, but it was also recording everything, transmitting everything back to Vorkath space. "They're learning," Thessa said quietly. "The Vorkath are watching this. They're learning how these ships fight." And soon they would adapt. They always did. But then something else happened. The strange flagship opened a channel not to the Vorkath but to the Qualron. A voice came through the speakers. Human. Thessa had heard of humans, of course. The Galactic Council's newest members, barely interstellar, primitive by most standards. "This is Commander Tessa Vance of the United Earth Fleet," the voice said. "We've intercepted your distress signal. You're safe now." Safe? Thessa looked at the Vorkath retreating, their formation in chaos, their pride shattered. She looked at the strange ships that had arrived from nowhere and done the impossible. "You don't understand," she said. "The Vorkath never forget. They'll come back, they'll study you, they'll find your weakness." The human commander was silent for a moment. Then she spoke again, and there was something in her voice that made Thessa's heart go cold. "We know what they'll do," Vance said. "We've been watching them for 40 years. We know how they think, how they adapt, how they plan." A pause. "We've been waiting for them to find us." The Galactic Council chambers had never been so full. Ambassadors from 200 species packed the circular hall, their voices rising in overlapping panic. The Qualron delegation stood in the center, Admiral Thessa at their forefront, her form still marked with the burns and scars of battle. She had refused medical treatment until she delivered her report in person. 40 cycles of preparation, 17 civilizations consumed, and now this. "The Vorkath are not merely an invading force," Thessa said, her translator broadcasting her words across the chamber. "They are an extinction event. We know this because we saw it. We watched them learn." She activated the holographic display at the center of the room. Recorded footage played, the Vorkath fleet engaging the human ships, adapting in real time, changing their approach. They study every enemy, Thessa continued. They record every engagement. They analyze every tactic. Then they return with new strategies designed specifically to counter what they've seen. This is what they did to the Jorvak, the Netharim, the Muralax, and now they will do it to the humans. The chamber erupted again. Delegates shouted over each other, demanding action, demanding explanations. Where did these humans come from? Demanded the K-Rel ambassador, his carapace clicking with agitation. They were barely warp-capable a century ago. How do they possess such weapons? They weren't ready before, someone else shouted. They've had the technology all along, they've been hiding it. No, Thessa said, that's not what happened. She pulled up another recording, human fleet movements from the battle, the strange ships, their tactics. These aren't advanced weapons, she said. They're primitive, kinetic mass drivers, sacrificial armor plating. They're fighting with technology that's centuries behind Vorkath capabilities. The room went still. Then how did they win? Asked the Thraxian representative, his massive frame leaning forward. Thessa met his eyes. They won because they're willing to take losses we wouldn't accept, because they designed their ships to be expendable, because when the Vorkath retreated to adapt, the humans followed them. She brought up the most disturbing footage, the moment the human flagship engaged the Vorkath command vessel. The human ship had taken devastating damage. Its engines were failing. Its weapons were offline. They had no way to continue fighting, Thessa said. Standard tactical doctrine would have been to retreat, to regroup, to survive for another engagement. The footage showed the human ship accelerating. They rammed, Thessa said quietly. They sacrificed their own ship to take out the Vorkath command vessel. The crew knew they would die. They did it anyway. The chamber was silent. The doors opened. Commander Tessa Vance walked in, flanked by two human officers. Her uniform was crisp. Her face was calm. She looked at the assembled delegates as if this were a routine briefing. "Thank you for the introduction, Admiral," Vance said, "but you've missed a few details." She walked to the center of the room, standing where the holographic display had been. "The Vorkath have conquered 17 civilizations," she said. "We know. We've studied every battle, every tactic, every adaptation." She activated her own display, not with footage but with schematics, human designs. "We didn't just build ships to fight the Vorkath," Vance continued. "We built our entire civilization to survive them. Everything, our military structure, our economic systems, our social policies, has been designed with one goal: outlast the Vorkath." "But you're just discovering space travel," the Thraxian representative objected. "You haven't had time to." "We discovered faster-than-light travel 94 years ago," Vance interrupted. "Before that, we spent 6 centuries fighting wars with each other. 6 centuries of learning how to adapt, how to survive, how to win against enemies who were technologically superior." She turned to face the entire chamber. "You see us as newcomers," she said, "but the Vorkath have never fought an enemy like us. They study tactics, they exploit weaknesses, they find patterns and destroy them." She paused. "We don't have patterns. We had 6 centuries to break ourselves of patterns. We fight with chaos and desperation and the willingness to burn anything to survive. The Vorkath don't know how to fight that." The Qualron ambassador stepped forward. "You're overconfident. The Vorkath will study you. They will adapt. They will," Vance agreed. "And we will adapt right back. That's what we do, Ambassador. That's all we do." She pulled up a final schematic, something the delegates hadn't seen before. A massive structure still under construction, shipyards, hundreds of them. "You want to know why we waited?" Vance asked. "Why we let 17 civilizations die before we entered this fight?" She let the question hang. "Because we weren't ready. We had the will, but we didn't have the numbers. The Vorkath have been building their fleet for centuries. We've been building ours for 8 decades. She pointed at the schematic. This is what we've been doing while the Vorkath conquered 17 civilizations. We've been preparing. We've been building. We've been learning everything we could about them. She looked around the chamber. You asked for help. We're giving it to you, but understand what you're getting. The lights in the schematic flickered to life. Each shipyard activation represented, each new vessel coming online. Humanity doesn't fight wars to win battles, Vance said. We fight wars to end them, whatever it costs, however long it takes. We will drive the Vorkath back to their home system, and we will make sure they never threaten anyone again. The delegates shifted uneasily. There was something in Vance's voice that made even seasoned diplomats uncomfortable, a certainty that bordered on terrifying. What's the cost? Asked a representative from the far edge of the chamber. Vance looked at her. Everything. We're prepared to pay everything. The Thraxian representative rose. And if we decline your help, if we decide to negotiate with the Vorkath instead? Vance smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach her eyes. Then you'll be negotiating with a species that has never, in its entire history, accepted a surrender they didn't offer first. The Vorkath don't make peace. They make graves. She stepped back from the display. We're going to fight them with or without you, but if you want to survive this war, you'll fight beside us. You'll learn our tactics. You'll accept our command structure. And you'll understand that some costs aren't negotiable. The chamber erupted in debate, argued, shouted, deliberated. Vance waited. Finally, the Qualron ambassador raised her voice. You ask us to trust you, to follow you into a war that might end our species. Why should we? Vance looked at her, really looked, with the weight of generations behind her gaze. Because we've already won. Silence. The Vorkath think they're studying us, Vance said. They think they're learning our patterns. They're wrong. We've been feeding them data, false patterns, tactics that won't work against our real strategy. She let that sink in. Every battle we fought before today was a test, a chance to see how they'd react. They think they're learning how to beat us, but what they're really learning is exactly what we want them to know. The delegates stared at her. The Vorkath have a war against humanity, Vance said, and they don't even know it's already over. Admiral Thrax had studied the footage for 12 cycles. His command bridge was dark, lit only by the holographic display showing the human engagement. He had watched the same sequence hundreds of times, the primitive human ships charging into his formation, absorbing fire that should have destroyed them, returning fire with kinetic weapons that ignored shielding. His strategic officers stood in a semicircle around him. They had been running simulations for days, every possible adaptation, every counter-tactic, every outcome. They had found none. Explain it again, Thrax said. How do they survive our weapons? The lead strategist stepped forward, a veteran of 17 conquests, his carapace marked with the scars of battle. The armor is sacrificial, Admiral, multiple layers designed to detach under impact. The energy from our weapons is dispersed across the detachment surface. By the time they reach the inner hull, the impact has been reduced to manageable levels. Then we increase the yield, Thrax said, double the firepower. We did in the simulations. The humans simply add more layers of armor. They don't care about mass or maneuverability. Their engines are designed to handle the extra weight. Thrax's claws tapped against the armrest of his command chair. And their weapons, mass drivers, are primitive. Every civilization abandons them for energy-based systems. Why haven't we? Because energy weapons are predictable, another strategist said. They follow line-of-sight patterns. They can be anticipated. Mass drivers are just rocks. You don't know where they'll hit until they're already there. Then we increase our shield density. It doesn't help. The shields stop energy weapons by absorbing them. Mass drivers generate kinetic force, not energy. The shields don't catch them. They punch right through. Thrax stood, his officers stepped back. "We have conquered 17 civilizations," he said. "We have adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy, broken every species that stood against us. And now these newcomers." He activated the display. A human face appeared, Commander Vance. Her expression calm, even as her ship prepared to ram his command vessel. "They sacrifice themselves," Thrax said. "They throw their lives away without hesitation. Why?" "Cultural conditioning," an officer offered. "They value individual sacrifice for collective survival." "No," Thrax shook his head. "Every species has that, but no species actually does it. They talk about sacrifice. They prepare for sacrifice. When faced with the actual moment, they hesitate. These humans didn't hesitate." The bridge was silent. "Send the fleet to Kale's Reach," Thrax ordered. "We'll engage them on our terms. Open space. No planets to hide behind. We'll see how their primitive tactics handle a full Vorkath assault." The officers saluted and dispersed. Thrax watched the human face on the display. "You fought us once," he murmured, "but you haven't fought us when we're prepared." Kale's Reach was a graveyard. The humans had arrived first, 8 ships, all blocky and utilitarian, arranged in no recognizable formation. Thrax watched from his flagship, the Eternal Victory, his fleet spread out behind him in perfect geometric precision. 50 ships, overwhelming firepower, total tactical superiority. "The humans are hailing us," communications reported. "Put them through." Vance's face appeared again. "Admiral Thrax, I've been expecting you." "You attacked our forces without provocation," Thrax said. "You destroyed our ships, you killed our crews, now you'll face the consequences." "The Qualron asked for our help," Vance replied. "We gave it. You didn't give them a chance to surrender. Why should we expect different?" Thrax's claws tightened. "Surrender is irrelevant. Your species is weak. Your technology is primitive. Your tactics are desperation disguised as strategy. We've studied you for 12 cycles. We've found every weakness." "Have you?" Vance smiled. "I don't think you have." The human ships began to move. Not in formation, not in pattern. Each ship moved independently in unpredictable directions. They were trying to break his tactical geometry, to force him to adapt in real time instead of following a predetermined plan. "Order our fleet to spread out," Thrax commanded. "Maintain our formations but create distance. Standard counterpattern beta." The Vorkath ships responded instantly. Their perfect geometry shifted, creating gaps between ships, reducing the effectiveness of any concentrated attack. The humans didn't concentrate their attack. They attacked the gaps. 3 cruisers destroyed, a tactical officer shouted. "The humans they're shooting through the gaps in our formation." Thrax stared at the display. The human ships were targeting the spaces between his vessels, not hitting them, but hitting the space they would occupy if they tried to close formation. "They're anticipating our adaptations," someone said. "They know we'll try to regroup." "Then don't regroup," Thrax ordered. "Engage individual ships. Focus fire on one target at a time. Overwhelm them." The Vorkath fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced across the void, targeting the lead human ship. The sacrificial armor did its job, layers detaching under impact, the ship maintaining its speed even under heavy fire. But Thrax had planned for this. The second wave of fire came from a different angle, striking the human ship where the armor had already been stripped. Hull breaches appeared. Atmosphere vented. "1 human ship crippled," the tactical officer reported. 2 more. He stopped. 2 more human ships had accelerated into the path of his fire. They were blocking the shots meant for their crippled comrade. They were taking damage that wasn't theirs to take. "They're forming a shield," an officer breathed. "They're sacrificing themselves for each other." "This is not how species fight," Thrax growled. "Species preserve their ships, they preserve their crews, they do not." 4 human ships now destroyed, the tactical officer interrupted. The remaining 4 are charging our command section. Thrax looked up. 4 human ships were indeed moving directly toward his position. They were ignoring his fleet entirely. They were coming for him. Bring all defensive systems online, he ordered. Recall the fleet, protect the flagship. The Vorkath ships turned. They disengaged from their current targets, moving to intercept the human charge. But the humans were faster. Their engines had been pushed to maximum, their sacrifice of armor giving them weight advantages they shouldn't have. 2 more human ships died under concentrated fire. Their debris scattered across the void, burning wreckage that added to the horror of the battle. The remaining 2 ships kept coming. Target those ships, Thrax ordered. Destroy them before they reach us. The energy beams hit. Sacrificial armor detached. Hull breaches appeared. One of the human ships lost its engines, trailing debris as it spun out of control. The last human ship reached the eternal victory. It didn't fire. It didn't try to board. It simply accelerated, driving its hull directly into the flagship's bridge section. The impact shook the eternal victory to its core. Damage reports flooded in. The human ship had been destroyed, but it had taken out the flagship's primary observation deck, killed dozens of crew members, and nearly compromised the bridge itself. Thrax's claws dug into his command chair as the ship shuddered again. Secondary explosions were spreading through the human wreckage, doing more damage in death than it had in life. Status, he demanded. 23 ships destroyed, 37 damaged. The humans they're all gone. Thrax stared at the display. 8 human ships had engaged 50 Vorkath vessels. The humans had been annihilated. Every single ship, every single crew member, every single piece of their fleet. And they had taken almost half of his forces with them. This is not how species fight, Thrax repeated. Species retreat, species regroup, species. Admiral, the human wreckage, an officer reported. It's not debris, it's transmitting. Put it through. The audio crackled, a recording, presumably prepared before the battle began. A human voice, calm and measured. To the Vorkath Dominion. You destroyed our ships, you killed our crews, you think you won. You think this battle proves your superiority. A pause. You're wrong. 8 ships engaged your fleet. 8 ships took down almost half your forces. Now multiply that. Multiply that by the thousands of ships we have waiting, by the millions of soldiers we have training, by the billions of humans who will never surrender, never retreat, never stop fighting until you understand what you've done. The audio ended. Thrax looked at his officers. They were silent, shaken. Dispatch a message to the Dominion, he said. We need reinforcements. We need more ships. We need to understand what these humans are. He looked at the display again. The human wreckage still burning, still doing damage even in death. They're not just a species, he muttered. They're a message, a warning, and we didn't understand it until it was too late. The transmission reached Vorkath space 27 cycle after the Battle of Kale's Reach. Admiral Thrax had prepared it himself, a comprehensive report on human tactics, human weapons, human psychology. He had included every detail from the engagement, every observation about their willingness to sacrifice, every calculation of their potential fleet size. He had also included the recording, the human voice, the promise of more ships, more soldiers, more war. The Vorkath High Command received the transmission in their assembly chamber. 24 generals, 8 admirals, and the Supreme Commander himself, an ancient being named Varth, whose authority had never been questioned. They watched the footage of Kale's Reach in silence. The humans, Varth said finally, are what species become when they've survived impossible odds. They don't fight for conquest. They don't fight for glory. They fight for survival itself. Then we give them no other option, one general suggested. We offer peace. We allow them to keep their territory. You've studied the report, Varth interrupted. Humans don't accept peace from enemies who have attacked them. They would see it as manipulation, as a temporary respite before further aggression. They would use the time to build more ships, train more soldiers, prepare for the inevitable betrayal. Then we destroy them, another general said. We build a massive fleet, overwhelming force, and we crush them completely. We tried that at Kale's Reach, Thrax said quietly. 50 ships against 8, we barely survived. The chamber fell silent. 50 ships against 8, Varth repeated. And you're telling me that we are losing this war? We are learning, Supreme Commander, Thrax said. Every engagement provides more data. We'll adapt. We always adapt, but this will take time. Varth rose from his seat. Time. Time for humans to build more ships. Time for humans to train more soldiers. Time for humans to find allies among the species we've conquered. Then what do you propose? Varth looked at the assembled commanders. We send everything, every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We hit their homeworld and we hit it until nothing remains. That's what they want, Thrax said. They've designed their war strategy around this. They want us to commit our entire force to one battle. Then we'll commit, Varth said, and we'll win. The first human war. That's what the historians would call it centuries later. But for those who lived through it, it wasn't a war. It was a nightmare. The Vorkath launched their full assault on Earth. 4,000 ships, 2 million soldiers, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. They crossed human space in waves, overwhelming every defensive position, burning through every world that stood in their path. The humans retreated. They always retreated, falling back toward their home system, sacrificing ships to buy time, leading the Vorkath deeper into territory that had been prepared for exactly this moment. The retreat is too clean, Thrax warned. They're not fighting to win these engagements. They're fighting to slow us down, to make us follow. Let them slow us, Varth replied. We have overwhelming force. They can't stop us. They reached Earth's outer defensive perimeter. Human orbital platforms, massive structures bristling with weapons, automated drones, minefields, everything a species could build to protect their homeworld. The Vorkath engaged the defenses. Ships died on both sides, but the Vorkath had numbers. They kept coming. And then something changed. The human tactics shifted. Instead of retreating, they held. Instead of sacrificing ships to buy time, they started taking ground. The orbital platforms didn't just defend, they attacked. Drones swarmed Vorkath ships in coordinated patterns that hadn't appeared in any previous engagement. They're fighting differently, Thrax reported. They've changed their approach. Impossible, Varth said. Species don't change tactics in the middle of a war. They refine existing strategies. They optimize. Humans aren't species, Thrax said quietly. They're something else. The Vorkath fleet pressed forward. They broke through the orbital defenses. They reached Earth's atmosphere. They began their descent. And that's when the humans showed them what survival truly meant. Ground forces, billions of them, armed with weapons that made no sense, fighting with tactics that violated every doctrine. They didn't form battle lines. They didn't hold positions. They moved in chaos, striking from nowhere, disappearing into terrain that the Vorkath hadn't studied. Every human is a soldier, Varth said, watching the footage. Every human is prepared to die. The Vorkath advanced slowly. They took casualties, they adapted, they learned. But the humans kept changing. One day they fought from fortified positions. The next they abandoned those positions and ambushed Vorkath forces in transit. One week they used energy weapons. The next they switched to kinetic weapons that the Vorkath had equipped to defend against. They cycled tactics faster than any enemy the Vorkath had ever faced. We're losing soldiers, a general reported. Not just to combat, to psychological breakdown. The crews are seeing things, hearing things. They're losing their cohesion. What things? Varth asked. Human boarding parties, the general said. They're not just destroying our ships. They're occupying them, turning them against us. Varth looked at the tactical display. Several Vorkath ships had gone dark, not destroyed but silent, unresponsive. The humans are taking our ships, he said. They're using our own weapons against us. We've never encountered this before, Thrax admitted. Species either flee or they fight. They don't steal ships, they don't. Commander, an officer interrupted. I have an incoming transmission. It's from the human flagship. Put it through. Commander Vance's face appeared on the display. She looked older than before, harder. There were marks of exhaustion around her eyes, but there was also something else. Supreme Commander Varth, she said, I'm going to give you one chance. Withdraw your forces from Earth. Leave this system, never return. And if we refuse, Varth asked, then we'll make you understand what you're dealing with. Varth laughed. We are the Vorkath Dominion. We've conquered 17 civilizations. We have 4,000 ships in this system alone. What could you possibly do to threaten us? Vance smiled, the same thin expression she'd worn before the Battle of Kale's Reach. 8 ships, Supreme Commander. Remember, 8 ships took down almost half your fleet. Now imagine what we can do with everything we have. She gestured to someone off-screen. Show him. The display changed. A schematic appeared. Earth shipyards, hundreds of them operating at full capacity, new ships launching every day, more soldiers training every hour. You thought you were attacking a desperate species, Vance said. You thought you were crushing us. You were wrong. She paused. You were walking into a trap, Supreme Commander, and now that you're inside, we're closing the door. Commander Tessa Vance had been waiting for this moment for 40 years. Not the battle, not the war. The moment when the Vorkath realized they had made a mistake, a single, catastrophic mistake that would doom their empire. She stood on the bridge of the indomitable, Earth's newest flagship, watching the tactical display unfold. 4,000 Vorkath ships were in the Sol system. 4,000 enemy vessels that had followed her fleet across human space, through defenses that were designed to fail, past positions that were meant to be overrun. All of it had been a trap, every retreat, every sacrifice, every world they'd burned. The Vorkath had walked right into the cage. Now she was going to close the door. Status on the defensive network, she ordered. All platforms online. Asteroid field defenses activated. The outer system minefields are armed. And the response fleet. Positioned at the edge of the system, they're waiting for the signal. Vance nodded. Send the signal. From Earth's outermost planets, something emerged. Not ships, not weapons, something far worse. The humans had spent decades preparing for this moment. They hadn't just built warships, they'd built a system. A network of defenses that turned the Sol system into a fortress. Minefields that could be activated remotely. Asteroid fields that could be redirected to intercept enemy formations. Planetary defense platforms that could coordinate their fire across light seconds of distance. But the real trap was the human fleet. 4,000 Vorkath ships had entered the Sol system. They had expected to face a desperate defense, a last stand, a final battle. Instead, they faced something far worse. The human fleet didn't attack them. It didn't try to stop them. The human fleet attacked their exit. All ships focus fire on the Vorkath rear lines, Vance ordered. Close the door. Don't let them leave. Human ships accelerated toward the Vorkath formation's rear, the ships that had been left behind to guard the escape route. These were the weakest vessels in the Vorkath fleet, designed for support, not combat. The humans hit them hard, targeting engines and communications, turning them into drifting wreckage. Rear lines are collapsing, her tactical officer reported. The Vorkath can't retreat. Now we engage, Vance said. All ships advance, standard pattern Gamma. Standard pattern Gamma. It sounded formal, strategic, like any other military tactic. But to the humans who had designed it, pattern Gamma was something else. It was the death knell. Human ships moved in patterns that made no sense to anyone but them. They didn't hold formations. They didn't maintain positions. They swarmed like insects, striking at the edges of the Vorkath fleet, then pulling back, then striking again. 8 human ships destroyed, the tactical officer reported. 14 Vorkath. Keep pushing, Vance ordered. Don't give them time to regroup. The battle raged across the Sol system. Earth's orbital platforms fired continuously, their automated systems targeting Vorkath ships with precision. Asteroid fields were redirected into enemy formations, not because they were more powerful or more skilled, but because they were unrelenting. A human boarding party didn't stop until the ship was theirs or they were dead. They used every trick, every weapon, every piece of insanity that could be weaponized. We have reports, the officer continued. The Vorkath crews they're surrendering, some of them are refusing to fight. Vance stared at the display. It was true. Vorkath ships were going dark, not destroyed but powered down. Crews surrendering, ships giving up. This is not how the Vorkath fight, she said quietly. No, her officer agreed. It's how they break. Admiral Thrax watched the battle unfold from his position in the Vorkath rear lines. He had known this would happen. He had warned them. The humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't give up. They didn't retreat. And now his people were dying. Admiral, we need to break out, his tactical officer said. We can't hold this position. The humans have sealed our exit, Thrax replied. We can't leave. Then we have to fight, we have to. The ship shuddered, alarms blared. Impact on the forward hull, boarding parties detected, human boarding parties. Thrax closed his eyes. This was what he had been dreading, the final phase of the human attack. Contain them, he ordered. Don't let them reach the bridge. But he knew it was too late. The humans were already inside. He could hear the sounds of fighting, energy weapons, explosions, the screams of his crew. He opened his eyes. A human had appeared on his display. Not a communication, a recording prepared for exactly this moment. Her face was calm. Her eyes were cold. Admiral Thrax, you've studied us. You've learned our tactics. You think you understand what we are. She paused. You're wrong. You've only seen what we let you see. You've only fought the battles we allowed you to fight. Now you're inside the trap and there's no way out. The sounds of fighting were getting closer. Thrax grabbed his sidearm. He would not be taken alive. He would. The door exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through, their weapons blazing. Thrax fired wildly, taking down one of them, 2 of them, 3. A blast caught him in the chest. He fell backward, his vision swimming. The humans surrounded him. Admiral Thrax, a human voice said, "You're coming with us." Thrax tried to fight, but his body wouldn't respond. The humans lifted him, carried him away from the bridge. As they moved through the ship, Thrax saw what the humans had done. His crew, his people were everywhere, some dead, some wounded, some simply broken, sitting in corners, their eyes empty, their weapons abandoned. The humans had done this. The humans had broken his fleet, his people, his war. And they weren't done yet. "Where are you taking me?" Thrax asked. "To the flagship," the human replied. "The commander wants to speak with you." Thrax closed his eyes. He had failed. His species had failed. Everything they had built, everything they had conquered, it was all gone. And for what? For 8 ships that had refused to die. For a species that had turned desperation into a weapon. He didn't have an answer. He didn't think anyone had an answer. The Vorkath Dominion had never experienced defeat. That wasn't hyperbole. That was a simple historical fact. For centuries they had won every war, conquered every species, adapted to every threat. Their military doctrine was perfect. Their tactical systems were flawless. And now, in a single battle, everything had changed. Supreme Commander Varth sat in his personal quarters, staring at the tactical display. The Sol system was burning, thousands of his ships destroyed, hundreds more captured, the survivors scattered and broken. "We've lost contact with Admiral Thrax," an officer reported. "His flagship was overrun by human boarding parties. No survivors have been identified." Varth didn't respond. He was thinking about the human transmission, the one they had intercepted after the battle. "You walked into a trap, Supreme Commander, and now that you're inside, we're closing the door." The humans had known. They had known from the beginning. Every battle, every sacrifice, every retreat, it had all been part of their plan. They had baited him. They had drawn him in. And now his entire fleet was trapped in the Sol system, surrounded by enemies who wouldn't surrender, who wouldn't stop, who couldn't be reasoned with. "What are our options?" Varth asked. "We have enough ships to break out," the officer said. "But the humans are too strong. We need to regroup, to adapt to." "Adapt?" Varth laughed bitterly. "We've been adapting for centuries, 17 civilizations. We adapted to all of them. And now we face one species that adapts faster, that changes faster, that never stops changing." The officer was silent. "Send a message to Earth," Varth ordered. "Open a channel to Commander Vance." The humans responded within moments. Vance's face appeared on the display, her expression unreadable. "Supreme Commander," she said, "I assume you've reached a decision." "I have," Varth said. "I'm offering terms. Full withdrawal from human space. No further attacks. We'll return to our own territory and never threaten you again." Vance was silent for a long moment. "That's not a surrender, Supreme Commander. That's a ceasefire. And we don't accept ceasefires from species that have already shown us what they do when they have the advantage." "What more do you want?" Varth demanded. "We've admitted defeat. We're leaving. Isn't that enough?" Vance leaned forward. "No, it's not enough. You attacked us without provocation. You killed billions of our people. You burned 17 worlds that weren't even yours to take. You don't get to walk away from that." The bridge was silent. "Here's what's going to happen," Vance continued. "Your fleet will surrender, every ship, every soldier. You will turn over your command structure, your weapons, your technology. You will spend the rest of your lives answering for what you've done. And if we refuse, then we'll destroy you. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of your fleet. We'll keep fighting until nothing remains." Varth stared at her. He had seen many things in his centuries of command. He had seen desperate species, broken species, species that begged for mercy. He had never seen anything like this. "You would destroy us completely," he said. "You would commit genocide." Vance's expression didn't change. "We would do whatever it takes. That's what survival means. That's what you taught us." Varth closed his eyes. He thought about his people, their history, their legacy, everything they had built over centuries of war and conquest. And he knew in that moment that it was all over. "Very well," he said. "I agree to your terms." Vance nodded. "We'll send shuttles to your flagship. Your officers will be detained. Your fleet will be disarmed. You'll be transported to a secure facility." Varth listened to the words, but they seemed distant, unreal. He had never imagined this. He had never imagined defeat. "The humans," he said suddenly. "What are you? What kind of species learns to fight like this, to sacrifice like this?" Vance looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke. "We're what happens when you push a species to the edge and they refuse to fall. We're what happens when you take everything from us and we keep fighting. We're the nightmare you should have seen coming, Supreme Commander, but you were too busy conquering to notice." Varth nodded slowly. "I understand now. We were wrong about everything. We thought we were the conquerors. We thought we were unstoppable, but we were just predators among prey." His claws tightened. And you're the predator's predator. Vance smiled, the same thin expression she had worn at the beginning. Something like that. The shuttles arrived. Varth was led away, his officers following, his fleet surrendering one by one. The Vorkath Dominion, which had conquered 17 civilizations, was no more. And the humans, the newcomers, the primitive species from a backwater world, they had done it all. You've won, Varth said as he was led onto the shuttle. But I need to know, why didn't you destroy us? Why give us a chance to surrender? Vance looked at him, and for the first time Varth saw something in her eyes. Not triumph, not victory. Sorrow. Because we know what it's like to be pushed to the edge, she said. We know what it's like to lose everything. We know what it's like to be the species that everyone wants to destroy. She turned away. Now you know what it's like to survive. The war was over. Earth's skies were clear. The Vorkath fleet had surrendered. Admiral Thrax was in custody. Supreme Commander Varth was being transported to a secure facility for the rest of his natural life. But Tessa Vance didn't feel like celebrating. She stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching the captured Vorkath ships drift in formation, escorted by human vessels, their crews detained, their weapons disabled. Everything had gone according to plan. Everything had been won. So why did she feel like they had lost something? Commander, her aide said, approaching quietly, the prisoners are asking for you. Admiral Thrax wants to speak with you personally. Vance nodded. I'll go. She walked through the corridors of her ship, past crew members who saluted, past soldiers who had survived the war. She saw their faces, the exhaustion, the trauma, the relief. They had won, but they had paid a terrible price. Thrax was being held in a high-security compartment. He sat on a bench, his manacles secured to the wall, his expression defeated. Commander, he said as she entered, I wanted to thank you. Vance raised an eyebrow. Thank me. For not destroying my people, for giving us a chance to surrender. Thrax looked up at her. You could have killed us all. You had the power, the weapons, the means, but you didn't. Vance sat across from him. It wasn't about destroying you, it was about stopping you. Is that what you tell yourself? Thrax smiled bitterly. You think you're better than us. You think you're different. We conquered because we wanted to. You conquered because you had to. But the result is the same. He leaned forward. The Vorkath Dominion is gone, but something else will rise in its place. Something that knows what you did. Something that watches what you became. And when that something comes for you, you'll understand. Vance was silent for a long moment. Maybe, she said finally, but that's not why I came here. She pulled up a holographic display, a map of the galaxy. You told me once that there are 17 species we've conquered, but there are more, aren't there? Other species that the Vorkath destroyed before you even reached the Galactic Council. Thrax nodded slowly. 6 more species. We found them, we conquered them. We studied their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. Then we destroyed them completely. Where are they? Vance asked. Where are their homeworlds? Thrax looked at her with interest. You want to find them? Why, they're gone, Commander, extinct. There's nothing left. There's always something left, Vance said. Remnants, survivors, refugees. We found your records, Admiral. We know you didn't kill everyone. Some species were enslaved. Some were forced to work for you. Some were, she paused, less fortunate. Thrax looked away. We need to find them, Vance continued. We need to free them. We need to give them what you never gave anyone, a chance. Thrax laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You're going to save them, all of them, after everything we did. Everything you did, Vance repeated. You said it yourself. We conquered because we had to. You conquered because you wanted to. There's a difference. She stood. You told me that the galaxy would understand what we've done. You're right, but you're wrong about what they'll understand. She walked to the door and turned back. They'll understand that some species don't just survive. Some species refuse to lose. Some species make survival a promise to the dead and the broken and the forgotten. She left the compartment, leaving Thrax alone with his thoughts. But the war wasn't over, not really. Thrax's words echoed in Vance's mind. When that something comes for you, you'll understand. She had known it was coming. She had always known. The Vorkath were just the beginning. There were older species out there, more powerful species. Species that had watched the war from the shadows, waiting to see what humanity would do. And now they had seen. Vance walked onto the bridge. Her crew was preparing for the next phase, tracking the remaining Vorkath slaves, finding the enslaved species, freeing them. It would take time, it would take resources, it would take everything they had left. But that was okay. Humanity had survived the Vorkath. They could survive anything. Commander, her tactical officer said, I have an incoming transmission, Priority 1. Put it through. A face appeared on the display. Not human, not Vorkath, something else, a species Vance had never seen before. Commander Tessa Vance, the alien said, you've been chosen for your victory over the Vorkath. We've watched you, we've studied you, and we've decided that you are worthy. Worthy of what? Vance asked. The alien smiled, a thin expression that made Vance feel cold. Worthy of the truth. The Vorkath were never the greatest threat. They were simply the first. There are others, Commander, older species, more powerful species, species that will come for you now that you've shown what you can do. Vance felt her heart sink. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you've done. You've won a battle, Commander, but the war has only just begun. The alien's eyes narrowed. Welcome to the fight, Commander. It's about to get much, much worse. The years after the war were filled with reconstruction. Earth's orbital defenses were repaired. The captured Vorkath ships were studied, their technology adapted. The Galactic Council reformed, with humans taking a central role. And the truth about what had happened spread across the galaxy. They crushed every fleet in their way, until humans entered the battle. That's what they said. That's what they whispered. The species that had been freed from Vorkath enslavement told stories about the humans, the species that fought without patterns, that sacrificed without hesitation, that won a war that should have been unwinnable. But Tessa Vance knew the truth. They had won, yes, but the cost had been staggering. Billions of human lives, thousands of ships, a civilization that had been forever changed by the conflict. Commander, an aide said, approaching her at the memorial service. The survivors are here. They want to pay their respects. Vance looked up. The survivors, species the Vorkath had conquered, freed by human soldiers, were assembling in the memorial garden. Their representatives bowed as they approached, offering gifts, words of thanks, promises of eternal friendship. We owe you everything, the Karel ambassador said. Without your intervention, we would still be slaves. Without your soldiers, we would still be broken. Vance smiled, a worn expression that didn't reach her eyes. Without your species, we wouldn't have known what we were fighting for, she said. We freed you, yes, but you saved us. The ambassador looked confused. You gave us a reason to fight, Vance explained. A reason to keep going. Without that, we would have just been surviving. You made it mean something. The ambassador nodded slowly. Then we're all survivors now, all of us. Yes, Vance agreed, all of us. But in her heart, she knew that survival wasn't enough. The alien transmission she had received after the war, the one warning about older, more powerful species, had changed everything. The Vorkath were gone, but the threats were still out there. And now that humanity had shown what they could do, they were a target. We have to be ready, she had said to her commanders. We have to prepare for whatever comes next. And they had. Shipyards were expanded, soldiers were trained, defenses were strengthened. The human war machine, which had been built to defeat the Vorkath, was now being built to face something worse. "It's never over," Vance said to her aide as the memorial service concluded. "It's never really over." "What do you mean?" the aide asked. "I mean that we've won a battle, maybe even a war, but the galaxy is still out there, and there are things out there that the Vorkath couldn't even imagine." She looked at the survivors, the species they had freed. They were happy. They were grateful. They thought the fighting was over. But Vance knew the truth. The fight was just beginning. "Commander," her tactical officer said, approaching with urgency, "I have another transmission, priority 1. Vance felt her pulse quicken. "Who is it from?" The officer looked at her with confusion. It's the same species as before, the one who warned us about the coming war." Vance nodded. "Put it through." The alien's face appeared on the display. It looked older now, older and more tired. "Commander," the alien said, "I have news. The other species, the ones I warned you about, they're moving. They've learned about your victory over the Vorkath, and they've decided that you're a threat." "A threat?" Vance asked. "We haven't even met them." The alien smiled. "That's what makes you so dangerous. You're unknown, unpredictable. You don't follow the rules that other species follow, and they don't like that." Vance took a deep breath. "What do they want?" "They want to understand you," the alien said. "They want to see how you fight, how you think, how you adapt. So they've sent a fleet to test you." "How big?" "Larger than the Vorkath fleet, much larger." Vance closed her eyes. This was what she had been dreading. This was what the war had been preparing her for. "When will they arrive?" she asked. "Months, Commander, maybe a year, maybe less. They're coming, and there's nothing you can do to stop them." Vance opened her eyes. "Thank you for the warning." The alien nodded. "You've saved a lot of species, Commander. You've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. But now you need to show them something else." "What?" "How to survive something even worse than the Vorkath." The transmission ended. Vance stood in silence, staring at the void where the alien's face had been. She thought about the survivors, the species they had freed, the gratitude they had shown, and she thought about the war that was coming. "We'll fight," she said to her commanders. "We'll fight like we've never fought before, and we'll show them what humanity really means." "What is that?" someone asked. "What do we mean?" Vance turned to face them. "We mean a species that cannot be broken, a species that cannot be defeated, a species that will keep fighting, keep surviving, keep winning, no matter what comes." She paused. "Because we are humanity, and we do not stop." The bridge was silent. Then one by one the crew members began to nod. Vance looked at the display. The galaxy stretched out before them, full of threats and opportunities, dangers and hopes. "All hands," she said, "prepare the fleet, we have work to do." The war against